Should should anyone even think about taking off with full flap? No. Welcome to the superpilotish channel. My name's Graham Wilson, and today I'm going to be talking about the Cessna 150, 152, and full flap configuration in my basement. Yeah. So the other day I was just kind of I don't know, checking out stuff on the internet like I normally do. And unfortunately, I found out about there was a little bit of an accident up in Quebec. Now, luckily, the person survived that was on board. And so I was like, oh, the pilots are kind of weird that anytime there's like an unfortunate incident like that, we got to find out what happened right away. And of course, you can't because there's no really big investigation or anything done. You can just kind of guess, but we're all great armchair quarterbacks, just like DH Pilot One. I'm sure he's a great armchair quarterback too. Hey, and I was looking at that crash. Oh, we don't like to call them crashes in the aviation industry. It's an accident or an incident. That one there would be considered an accident. So the media was reporting it as a Cessna 172, and the picture was of a Cessna 152. So that's another thing that us pilots, if we're looking into having some kind of a post-accident investigation, you can't really trust the media because as soon as I looked at that, it was like, oh, that doesn't look like a 172. And then I checked it out. I found another picture of it, and I checked the registration of the airplane, and yeah, it was a Cessna 152. And hey, Shecky, welcome to the show. So don't always believe everything you read in the newspaper about all these accidents, and really wait until there's an official I don't know, statement by the TSB or the NTSB, depending on what country you're in. So, but I'm not really going to talk about any accidents today. But I was kind of thinking more about, okay, now that I've determined, now that I've had to do my own research and find out what type of airplane it was, I fly one of those now. So I'm teaching one of my students how to fly in a Cessna 150. Cessna 150, Cessna 152, they're about the same. Very similar, a few small differences. But anyways, I was thinking, is there something I should be concerned about here? So I started looking at, oh, hi, Rich. So then I was like, okay, what's the deal with these crashes with Cessna 152s and stuff? Oh, sorry, accidents. And it was like, then I went down the YouTube rabbit hole, and I'm like, wow, there's there's like quite a few accidents with these things. And I was looking at that one and that one. And so this also got me it got me thinking about this one pilot examiner seminar that I attended. And for some reason, everybody was talking about, okay, when we're training people how to do, well, if you're a pilot examiner like I used to be, anytime that you're marking someone on the landing, they have to land and then come to a complete stop. You're not allowed to do what they call a touch and go, where you land and you keep rolling a bit, give it the power, and then take off again. That's not allowed on a flight test because you want to see if the student can brake properly or the candidate rather can brake properly. Are they handling the aircraft to come to a complete stop? So if you are going to be doing any type of anything like that for a flight test, you'll do what they call a stop and go. Now, some of the pilots here, they probably already know that stuff, but other people won't. So at this pilot examiner seminar, this is where all the examiners from our region would get together with the Transport Canada facilitator, and we talk about how to make things safer and how to test better and make sure we're all testing the same. And so all these people were talking about doing stop and goes. And I was like, well, where I was teaching is like, yeah, we always do touch and goes. It's like, just, why waste your time? And then, if it's a flight test, yeah, you'll do a stop and go. So, but all these people, their flight training units, they all got rid of touch and goes. And I was like, what is this? But now it keyed into my head after watching all these YouTube videos about how these older airplanes that can have 40 degrees of flap, which is actually it's a lot of flap. Most new airplanes don't have that. And oh, hey Dan, hey Jim. So it's like it all kind of came together. These people were flying older airplanes with 40 degrees of flap, and that made sense because that you would only do a stop and go. Because what happens if the flap gets stuck in the full, it's fully extended? So, yeah, and I was going to make a little demonstration here with the KD12X just to kind of show what a flap is. So I got got the KD12X out here, and we're going to do a little bit of modification here. This is all we're doing wing modification here. That's okay. It's considered an amateur built airplane, so I'm allowed to do this. I'm allowed to put duct tape on my airplane for the purposes of flight instruction. Here we go. And we're going to make a couple flaps. Okay, we got that guy there. He'll be the only airplane in the world with great big huge flaps and no ailerons. So let's see how this works out. Okay, and there will be a point to this arts and crafts demonstration at some point here. So we got one flap over here. Let's put it over like that. Oh, that is a good looking flap. Check that bad boy out. Nothing but the finest here on the Super Pilotish channel. We spare no expense. So anyways, there's another flap going on there. The reason I have two of these is because for visual teaching purposes, I'll show you what can happen. So there's a few things that can go wrong with your flaps on your airplane. Okay, like if you're flying around, your flaps on your airplane, they don't actually stick out that far, but okay, let's see if you can see that. All right, so they're just kind of sticking out. They're nice and even with the wing. There we go. So it's, the flaps are up there. Okay, you're flying along nice and cool. So the idea with the flaps there is that if you make it go down, and you'll notice this if you're on a big jet, when you come into land, you'll notice like pretty much the whole back of the wing just curves right over. And so they're deploying flaps there. So let's deploy about, I don't know. How much is that? We'll do it on both sides so it's not asymmetrical. Or, yeah, we want it to be even here. Okay, I don't know if you can see that. Okay, so you can kind of see there's a flap down there in the back of the wing. And right here. Okay, so that's down. That's probably about 40 degrees of flap right there. And with that much stuff hanging off the back of the wing, it creates a lot of drag. It creates a lot of lift, and it also creates a lot of drag. So anytime you're putting these little guys down, you create more lift and you create more drag. And the funny thing about aerodynamics is that the more you put this down, let's just say you had 90 degrees of flap, and it's just like this. That's insane. That's like a total air brake. And that's a whole lot of drag. So anything that like you got this like lift drag coefficients and all this aerodynamic stuff. So it's kind of like the drag will increase at a geometric rate. So it'll be kind of the square of the speed. I think it is something like that. There's something squared in there in the equation anyways. So that, you can have just a little bit of flap like that. So it's not a lot of lift. So it's not a lot of drag. And then you put it down more. I don't know if you can see that. Okay. Now we got a little more lift and a lot more drag. If you put it way down, then you got super drag and super lift. But so you're going to need a whole bunch of it. All kind of works together with power and stuff like that. But anyways, so what happens is I was like, okay, now if you have like a whole bunch of flap there, that I've never really flown a plane with that 40 degrees of flap before. All the other planes I had, the maximum was right around 30, 33, so, 28 degrees of flap coming down. But it's like, okay, I know it really does. And you can see there too, if your flaps go down like this, the air hits that and kind of makes your nose go down a bit. So you could be keeping like a really slow speed and just be kind of flat. So if you have 40 degrees of flap on in a Cessna 150, you're pretty much like flat, but you're still kind of descending. Whereas if you didn't have that, you would probably be you. Let me think here. You would probably be the nose is pushing it down, so you'd probably be. How would that work? Pushes that, so pushes it down. Yeah, your nose would be up a little bit more. So I got to think about that stuff. But anyways, yeah. So suffice to say, when you got your full flap on, you're pretty much always in a nose like a cruise attitude there. And depending on how much your power is, you're going to either go down or maintain or climb a bit. But your attitude doesn't change that much because you got all this drag. Okay, enough of that stuff. So I went flying and I was like, okay, I got to get to the bottom of this because I don't want to be flying with my student and then teaching him the wrong stuff. Or I want to know if I can handle this configuration. I haven't really done it that much. We use full flap to come into land, but I never tried to do a go around with that. So anyways, whenever it's always a good idea if you're going to be messing around with something new in an airplane, get up in the air, get lots of altitude, bring an instructor along, and ideally, and then you can do all your I wouldn't say experiments, but yeah, sort of experiments. Like you know what the airplane can do, but have you done it before? It's good to bring another set of eyes around if you haven't done it before, or maybe you've done it and you did it safely, but it was like a long time ago and you want to practice. There you go. Get lots of altitude. Altitude is your friend. If there's any oopses or anything like that, then it gives you lots of time before to figure things out while you're up in the air. You don't want to be figuring things out when you're 20 feet off the ground, heading towards a tree. So, anyways, yeah. So what was going on there? Yeah. So we went up, climbed up, and sure enough, we were like, okay, let's go into slow flight, and we'll just mess around with our full flap configuration. And I said, okay, let's pretend that we were coming into land and we had to go around, but our flaps stuck. So we had our 40 degrees of flap on there, gave it full power, and it really didn't climb that much. It was, I think at best, we'd probably get 100 feet per minute, which is not much if you want to clear some trees at the end of a runway or some phone wires or something like that. So, wow, that was really something. So you got to get those flaps up right away if you're going to be going around with full flap. But what if they get stuck? Yeah, that's the tricky thing. So the one thing I have learned from being in aviation long enough is that if you can even remotely imagine it happening, it will. So, like, oh, how could the flaps possibly get stuck? Maybe you blew a circuit breaker on that because they're electrically powered flaps. There you go. Circuit breakers, they blow all the time. Sometimes they just kind of wear out. There might not even be, they're older planes. They have fuses, some of them too. So it's like, okay, think about that and plan accordingly when you're flying. So okay, so that was another thing there too. So we could, with full power on like that, and there's two of us in the plane we weren't really full on gas. I think if we could probably just maintain level flight with the full flaps on. So if you were going to overshoot, you got 40 degrees of flap. One of the things to watch out for is and it's very common, and I've read about accidents happening that way, where a student comes down, they might forget their flaps in the fully down position with 40 degrees of flap. They give it full power, but they forget to put the flaps back up, and they start pitching up to climb. Their airspeed drops off and kind of falls out of the sky. That's called a stall. But yeah, that's one of those things you got to watch out for. So anyways, right, what else we got here? So I was going to talk about that. So yeah, I would say if you are going to be fooling around with any big flap, that was another thing too. Okay, so that's at 40 degrees of flap. any other airplane that I have flown with 30 degrees of flap, Cessna 172, Cessna 152 with 30 degrees flap, Piper Tomahawk, all of those planes, if you were taking off, you could take off actually with full flap with 30 degrees, because it's the difference of that 10 degrees makes all the difference for how much drag the plane has. And that's why they've kind of discontinued that in most airplanes, that you don't have that much, for just that reason. So, yeah, I've taken off with full flap in just about every plane that I've flown in, because I've forgotten to put the flaps up. But they're okay for that. Just as long as you keep your airspeed, eye on your airspeed, you're good. So it's like kind of one of those things that, if you're monitoring that, okay, you're fine. If you forget about that, and you forget about this, and you forget about that, you forget a few of these things, and that all adds up to like a chain of events, which leads to an accident. So, there you go. Oh, hey, Adam. See you in here. Yeah, actually, while Adam's talking about this, Adam's got here we go. He's got good old Lum. That's a Cessna 150, and it's got 40 degrees of flap. I've flown in that plane a couple times. And he said 40 degrees of flaps like riding an elevator down. I would agree. So, I mean, it's really nice if you want to do a forced approach for a flight test and you're too high. Just, 40 degrees flap. And it's like putting the air brakes on, and yeah, you're really going down. So, there we go. Okay. And then, so yeah, okay, how can I do this here now? So I was talking about taking off with full flaps. Oh, and yeah, you just got to kind of be careful about that. So I was thinking, how could I, as a good instructor, not have any problems with this full flap configuration? Because like I think with a really hot day, and if you're really overloaded, not overloaded, but at the top of, like, you could be totally legal, with all the fuel and people there and baggage, and you're right at the maximum gross weight that the thing can have on a really hot day with full power, 40 degrees of flap, Cessna 150, you're going down. It'll probably, I'd say probably around 100 feet per minute, so it won't be immediate. But 100 feet per minute, if you're only 100 feet off the ground, and the trees are coming up, that's not good. So keep that in mind. So, oh, hey, Dustin. Okay, so we're going to do, how are we going to fix this? How is the superpilotish channel going to save lives today? Well, here we go. So we'll give you some tips. 40 degree of flap tips. Now, a lot of, I guess I'll get into it. I wrote this down here. So it all starts with your pre-flight inspection. Or the walk around, as they call it, most of the time. You walk around the airplane, check it out. So pre-flight inspection. 40 degree flap tips. Number one, your pre-flight inspection. Okay, so before you even start the airplane in, I always tell people that, when you're flying an airplane, it's not like driving a car where you just hop in your car and go, right? And then if the car breaks down, who cares? You're at the side of the road. But if your car breaks down, you can't just pull over the side of the road if you're up in the air. So things get a little bit more complicated. And so during the pre-flight inspection there, now most of the time I've seen in the owners, the operators handbooks for these planes, is they'll say, flaps inspect, but they don't actually tell you to put the flaps down to see if they work. So, but most places, they will have some sort of a checklist where you do check the functionality of the flaps if they come up and down. It's kind of industry standard, but it would be, it's not required by the owner's handbook, but it's a very good thing to do. And I always do that myself. If I'm flying anywhere, I have my students do that. So pre-flight inspection. Okay, so put your flaps down, check them all out. Now, what are you actually checking for? Does it look like a flap? Yeah, looks like a flap to me. Let's go flying. Well, no, it's got to be more than that. So, ideally, what I look for is there's a little push rod that activates it coming down and bringing it back up, and there's a little rod. It's just this little thing, and there's a little nut on it, and just does it look good? Does it look bent? It's okay. And then I'll usually give the flap a little jiggle in the down position. Now there should be just a little bit of play there because there's some little rollers that kind of make it roll out, and you should hear a little clunk clunk, jiggle jiggle, and that should be good. And that's not they don't put clunk clunk, jiggle jiggle in the book, but that's a super pilotish thing. So yeah, it's gotta have a little bit of wiggle room to it. If it doesn't, then that means it could be kinked or bent or something like that, and you don't want that. You don't fly the plane. Go get a mechanic. And so there we go. So you're looking for the push rod and the jiggle on the pre-flight, and of course when they come up again, make sure they both come up at the same time. Okay. All right. Oh, that was another thing too that I found out about. If you are going to check your charging system, for some planes, they don't have an actual meter. It's just like a generator light. The light's on, it means that the battery's not charging. If the light's off, it's like a red light. Usually, the red light says warning, your battery's not charging. If the light's off, then you're good. So what you could do, even to check it again, is when you want to check your charging system, put a load on it by using the electric motors of the flap, and check your generator light. Does it go on? No. Okay, put the flaps back up, and away you go. So that's another little thing to do. Okay, the other thing I kind of mentioned about doing stop and goes, not touch and goes. Touch and goes. All right. Yep. So it doesn't hurt to request from the control tower do some stop and goes instead of touch and goes. The tower will either say yes or the tower will say no. And then if you say, well, I'm going to play it safe and I'm going to make this a full stop, get off here, get my flaps up, and then request a taxi to go taxi around and take off again. You can do that too. Us pilots figure out ways of getting what we want from the controllers, but usually they're pretty accommodating. And so what else we got here? If you're going to go around, like I'm thinking more for if you're doing practicing a forced approach or something like that. If you're going to do your go around or overshoot, as we call it here in Canada, do that a little bit sooner before you get too close to the ground. Because what could happen is, and every instructor has done this before, where they say, oh, I can go all the way down to the soybeans if I want legally for the purposes of instruction. So you start off and you say, this is cool. And I'm buzzing along the ground at like 10 feet. All right, this is cool, man. And there's a bunch of trees at the end of the runway, and then or at the end of the farmer's field. And you give her the gas and get your flaps up and you start climbing. Away you go. But if your flaps are stuck and you're 10 feet off the beans and you don't climb, you will either have to make the quick choice to land in the beans or you're smacking the trees. And then you got to go explain it to your boss and your student's wife. And, so I would say go around a little bit earlier than you would think, and then count on if it gets stuck. You're probably going to be dropping, if it's a super hot day and you're all loaded up, about 100 feet per minute. So that's something to consider. Or you won't be climbing that fast too. So what else we got here? And the other little thing here that you can do is just use 30 degrees of flap. Now I know for the purposes of a flight test, in Canada anyways, you are required to land with full flap. Unless they've changed the guide since then. I haven't really checked it out. I'll have to look at that. They always change those flight test rules. So Yeah. So, yeah, in normal everyday flying, if I had a plane like that and it's like, I wouldn't even bother with 40 degrees of flap. The difference in landing speed between 30 degrees flap and 40 flap, it's pretty negligible. And if you really if you're weighing the risk, is it worth it, to do that 40 flap? But for training purposes, you have to know how to use every configuration of your airplane, and you will be tested on using full flap. If the plane can use it, you're getting tested on it. So, yeah, so that's about it for that. Oh, another thing about the 30 degrees of flap on different airplanes. I know they have had, I'm pretty sure, like, even if you wanted to be super safe, you could even if you owned your own Cessna 150, you could rig it up, or a Cessna 1. Now, Cessna 172s aren't too bad about that. I've seen them. They're still a little tricky, but not too bad. But I have seen, and I have flown Cessna 172s that they limit the flap to 30 degrees, and that was on a couple of float planes. And the reasoning behind that, I guess, would be, hey, that's a whole lot of drag if you got those big floats underneath and you got 40 degrees of flap. Like, you're not going to be able to get around. So, and also I think it would make you land a little bit too nose forward. You'd have a lot more back pressure to keep the nose up when you're landing on your floats. So I think that's why they do that too. And I'm sure that could be available for Cessna 150s also. How much money do you want to spend? You got a plane? Yeah, the sky's the limit for blowing money. But yeah, okay. So there we go. We'll do this is how we're saving lives here on the Super Pilotish channel. 40-degree flap tips. We got the tips right here. Number one, check out your flaps on the ground before you even get up in the air. Look for a little bit of a jiggle, a little bit of play in the flap, and check that push rod and, hinges, stuff like that. Try to do stop and goes if you can instead of touch and goes. Go around a little bit earlier, give yourself a little bit of altitude, a little bit of leeway. Just always be thinking, what if these flaps don't come up? Or just use 30 degrees of flap and everybody's life gets a lot easier. So there we go. A few tips. And then so I guess the real question here, of is 40 degrees of flap dangerous? Not if it's working. But what if it doesn't? You got to kind of think about that too. And yeah, all right. Another thing I wanted to calm people's nerves a little bit too, that this is on a few specific little older planes that you probably won't be flying in. If you have a big airliner or something like that, those things have so much thrust, so much power that they could do anything they want. Just give her the coal, just give her the gas and they'll do anything. Like there was one, I was asking a guy that was flying what was it, a Dash 8 Q400, and he was like, oh yeah, theoretically you could just take off with one engine in those things. Like full fuel, full people, one engine. The only problem is, like, it'd be hard to control on the runway. You'd probably need like a 2-mile long runway or something like that. But if you could just get up to speed, it can take off just fine with just one engine. So if you got a little flap out there, you got those two powerful engines on that. Yeah, they're the way that they've over engineered these jets over the years, that any little bit of flap there, no problem. So nothing to worry about there. Just on the older ones, and especially, you don't want to be flying around in any planes that have kind of sketchy maintenance or anything like that. Oh yeah, flap looks okay, but are you getting in there and actually measuring tolerances of how much things wear out and stuff? Yeah, you might want to make sure that you get some good maintenance going on there too. Okay, so that's about it. I'm gonna go through. We'll go through the see if there's any questions here. I got kind of piloty today, so for the non-pilots, sorry about that. But hey, super pilotish, right? Okay, yeah. What do we got here? Okay, Wrench. I know that Wrench is a pilot, and he's never seen a POH that's described to take off with more than 10 degrees of flap. Right. For Uh, Anytime, depending on the airplane and stuff like that, usually 10 degrees of flap, that'll help you get off the ground. It'll give you a little bit more lift to get you off the ground a bit more, like more for a soft field or something like that. And yeah, so but the thing is, if you're doing touch and goes and stuff, people forget. So it's like it's not required. Like I always let my student make the mistake and not correct it because they usually only do that once and then they scare themselves and they don't do it again. But that's it's so fun to watch when they do that. It's like, okay, oh, they forgot the flaps. Let's see how this is going to work out. And then they take off and they're up in the air and they want to start pitching up, and but with those flaps, it's funny with the airspeed. I just remind them, okay, hold your airspeed, and then the students freaking out like, what? Something's wrong. What's going on here? And I just say, yeah, just keep your airspeed. Oh yeah, something is wrong, isn't there? And then they go, oh no, and then they put the flaps up and everything's cool. But I would rather have them forget while I'm in the airplane rather than I send them out solo and they forget and they freak themselves out. And there's not Mr. Instructor sitting there saying, like, hey, keep your airspeed going, keep your airspeed going. So the next time it happens to them, because it's already happened, they'll remember the old instructor voice saying, oh, watch your airspeed. And then there you go. So it's I don't know, and you gotta kind of have a sixth sense of humor to be to be an instructor too. Ooh, let's see how far they scared themselves today. So okay, and then yeah, Ranch was also saying here he flies a 152, which only has 30 degrees, and a 150 has 40. Yeah, 150 is a older version of a Cessna 152. What else we got here? Hey, Jim knows a guy with a vintage 2 engine. Any pilot interested in buying it? Any pilot with deep pockets out there? 2 engines. It's funny whenever people talk about buying a plane there. Well, I mean, it's natural when you start learning how to fly, you just start shopping for airplanes. Like, ooh, that one's not too bad. Oh, what if I got my multi-engine rating? I could get that one. But if you look at your maintenance cost, the cost of your engines also goes up geometrically. So you think, oh, it's got 2 engines, so the maintenance, the annual inspection should only cost twice as much. And it's like, no, it's like 4 times as much. It just there's all these other systems, more complicated fuel systems to check. You're dealing with constant speed propellers, retractable gear probably, and everything gets pretty expensive with those twins. But they're cool to fly though. Okay. Oh, let's hear it's a neat little comment here. So Ranch had a 63 Musketeer. Okay, so that's yeah, the Beach Musketeer. Yeah, those are nice planes. I've flown a Sierra, which is kind of like the retractable gear version of that one. Had 30 degree on a Johnson bar handle between the seats, but the plane would not even maintain altitude with 30 in full throttle at 20 degrees, just holding. Okay. Yeah, so that Musketeer, that's a little bit older of an airplane too. So yeah, that was probably full landing flaps too, I'd imagine. Yeah, so that would be something no matter what plane you're flying is just to go take it up, see how it handles, and then avoid those situations where your margins of safety are lowered close to the ground. Just kind of avoid them, and everybody's cool. Okay, what else we got here? Okay. Okay, what else we got here? We already talking about Adam's, how Adam already said, Lum has 40, and that's his Cessna 150 has 40 degrees. It's like riding an elevator down. Yep, very fun. Okay, we got a question here from Wrench 2. So have you ever had unbalanced flap? Is it possible to have one at 20 and one at 30 if broken? I would imagine so. I think if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this, is that usually the newer airplanes that I don't know, like kind of 1990s ish and newer, I'm pretty sure they have it kind of set up so that if one flap goes down, not the other one, that there's enough aileron to overcome that. but don't quote me on that. I know that happened to a buddy of mine that was flying a King Air where one flap went down and the other one didn't. So it started rolling. So by the time they got it back up again, they had full aileron, and then they managed to keep it level with full aileron and the flap deployed. And I think it got stuck down, but they were still okay. And well, one of them got stuck. That's all I remember. And he said he had full aileron, and they were not too happy about it. So, but the difference between 20 and 30, that probably, well, I mean, it wouldn't be as drastic as like 30 and 0. So, but no, never happened to me though, Rich. Okay, here we go. Well, what else? Yeah, passengers hate those 500 foot per minute drops. Depending on your speed, that's not so bad. But yeah, I mean, passengers, they like a nice, easy, smooth ride. Okay. All right. So what's DH Pilot 1 do with his students? For his students, he teaches them to check flaps up before turning at 500 feet after takeoff in case they took off with flaps. Example for short field or soft field takeoff, and they forget to retract them. Hey, that's a great idea. You were probably taught by a really awesome instructor there, DH Pilot 1. Anyways, here we go. Dustin popped in here. Yeah. Oh, here we go. This is a good safety tip for wrench. Make sure the tracks are good. Make sure nylon buttons are there and can fail if there's little nylon buttons are gone. Yeah, depending on the year of the plane. Yeah, just kind of make sure it all looks good. Oh, and that's right. And Adam here says I have manual flaps. That's right. The original Cessna 150s had a manual flap, just one bar there. That's pretty cool. Yeah, when you pull those flaps to 40, if you go from 0 to 40, you just reef this thing up, the plane pitches all over and stuff. It's pretty funny. But yeah, that love it. And if I'm not mistaken, the manual flaps on the old Cessna 150s, the mechanism there is actually lighter than all the electric motors and everything like that for the Cessna 152s. So you can actually carry a little bit more in the older Cessna 150s. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I remember hearing that somewhere. Okay. Oh yeah, so Dustin was wondering here too, do they have a version that's manual, like electric windows or manual in your car? Yeah, it's yep, just like I was talking about. The manual would be, instead of having a little electric switch, it'd be actually kind of like a mechanical pull. It looks just like a parking brake in your car. So there we go. Good stuff. Another mistake. Okay, here we go. Taking off with carburetor heat. Yeah, carburetor. Oh, here we go. We'll put that back up. If you have your carburetor heat on and you got your full flaps on and you got full power, you won't stay up. Yeah, that carburetor heat on just drops the power just enough, that extra 100, 150, 200 RPM. And yeah, it's like it's got to get that in. Okay. Okay, what do we got here? Gray OG. Evil pilot face. I don't make evil pilot faces. What are you talking about? Huh? Oh yeah. Okay, evil instructor face. Okay, what else we got here? Okay, that's about it, I think, for the questions. Yeah, great. Okay, so that's about it for today. We're gonna shut her down. I'll be back on today's Wednesday, so I'll be back on Friday because I do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon Eastern. I'll just kind of shut her down. So all you guys, thank you for watching.